Okay, so last class we set up number 8. We just painted kind of a solid color. Mine's a little scumbled. I have green with a little bit of blue on top. All right, next what we're going to do is you're going to get some of your tape. This is dry. All right, so hard edge with masking is when we have a dry layer of paint. And then we're going to create something else by masking. So you can get, this is a very small spot, so I'm just going to do maybe a diamond. And, in a large canvas, let's say you really wanted to make some crisp edges or some sort of crisp shape, then, you could do that. So what I'm going to do here is simply tape off the area I don't want to get paint on. And I really want to make a hard edge. That's really what's happening. I want to make a hard edge diamond. So I'm taping off the area I don't want to get paint on. And in a moment, we'll paint the area you do want a hard edge. Okay. So what I'm going to do with number 8 then, I masked off the area I don't want to get any paint on. I'm going to go ahead and get my paintbrush now. And I'm going to, my background was kind of a blue-green. So how about I'll just get white on top so I have some high contrast. And I'm just going to paint a little bit of white on it. Okay, that's it. You could let this dry. Some people like to let it dry and see how it looks. I'm going to go ahead and peel it up a little bit and let's see, did I get my hard edge? Yep. Okay, so there's my hard edge. There's my hard edge diamond layered on top of the background. And that would be the purpose of masking if you wanted to create a hard edge, some kind of crisp geometric shape or structure, something like that. All right, before we move on to 10 and 11 and 12, let's set up 13, 14, and 15. I want you to just paint a solid color on 13, 14, and 15. And we're going to let that dry while we're working on the other ones. And don't pay too much attention to getting it as flat as you can. I've got a little bit of white on my brush, so that's okay. Mine's going to have a little blending of blue and white. All right, just a nice thin layer. We want that to dry within the next couple of minutes. All right, so we have those set up. Let's leave them there to dry. And now let's go over to number 10. All right, number 10, we're gonna use your sponge, and we could go straight to doing this right onto your white paper, or you might want to experiment with what it looks like with a foundation layer. So I think I'm gonna do half of my square with a foundation and maybe half with just paper. Let's see what it looks like. So technically we'll have part of it wet into wet and part of it wet on dry. All right, so make sure this is still wet right here on number 10. Let's get your sponge. And you could, don't dip your sponge in water. Go ahead and just dip it straight into your paint. And I'm gonna use a different color. So I'm gonna go ahead and use yellow, and I'm gonna dip it in. You can use any side of the sponge you want. Mine is really thick, so I think I'm gonna use the edge. All right, and now it's just about experimenting with stamping. So with the sponge, you're simply just gonna press and lift, and press and lift. All right, and it's really just about creating a nice texture. All right, so I've got a little bit of it on top of the blue, mixing to make a little bit of green plus the texture. And then I kind of went over this several times. So I got a little bit of the yellow and my blue mixed to make green. And that's it. That's stamping with the sponge. All right, so for 11 and 12, we're just going to do some more experimenting. 11, we're simply going to take the sponge, and instead of pressing and releasing, we're going to drag it. All right, so for number 11, go ahead and dip your sponge in some paint. I'm going to try a different side of my sponge this time. And I'm going to drag it just really straight. How about just a drag straight? All right, and we're just kind of playing around with texture. And if you want, dip your sponge in another color. I'm going to go ahead and dip mine in blue because I'm going for my kind of yellow and blue mixed green theme. And I'll drag it. And the sponge, my sponge is dry, so that's why I'm getting a lot of nice texture. If your sponge had some water in it, you might actually start blending the color a little more seamlessly, but we're going for texture. Okay, and then number 12, drag sponge with a regular motion. That just means play around with your motion. We went straight across horizontal for number 11. For number 12, just play around with it. How about wiggle, wavy lines? And I'm using different sides of the sponge. I was using the flat side, now I'm using the edge. When you're done with your sponge, make sure to rinse it. Otherwise, this will dry and harden on the sponge, and then your sponge is useless. All right, so I just rinsed this out in my water, and I'll probably go back and rinse some more. All right, let's check to see how these are doing. Mine are still a little wet. All right, let's go over to number 16 while we're waiting for those other layers to dry. If you have a fan around, that would help. I'm going to turn my fan, my overhead fan on real high to help my paint dry. Okay, for dripping, we are going to get some of your paint, and this time we're going to make your paint watery. All right, so I've got my blue right here, and I'm going to dip my brush in water and actually drip some water in there. I'm making it really watery. And don't, I've got a little gob of paint there. I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to kind of move on over here to the side, and I'm going to keep getting some water and water this down a lot so that it looks more like watercolor paint. All right, remember when we did watercolors, we actually did spattering and dripping. It is the same concept here. We're just going to keep watering down our acrylics until we get a nice watery consistency, and then we can drip. You can drip by literally holding your paint over. I'm going to go ahead and tap it, which is technically spattering. I'm tapping my brush to spatter drip. Okay, but then I could also get even more water, and I'm really going to water this down this time. Even more water. All right, and now with that really, really watered down paint, I'm going to put a little bit on my rectangle. And just for good measure, I'm going to dip it in the water and just put some real water right there on it. And then I'm going to lift my paper up at a 45-degree angle. And drip. Got my paper towel. All right, and I'm going to do that again. How about try a different color? I'm going to get some of my purple and water it down a lot. Even got some of my blue bleeding in. That's kind of fun. All right, I'm going to put a little bit of my purple on there. Really watered down purple. And even grab some water and put it on there just to make sure it's nice and watery. Lift it up and drip. Do it, drip. All right, got it. There's my drips. Okay, I kind of like how mine went all the way down the paper, but you could, if you want, get your paper towel and just pat it dry. Okay, my 13, 14, and 15 are dry. How's yours? All right, we're going to go over to number 13. For scraping, this is actually very similar to something we did with our oil pastels. All right, so I have blue as my foundation color. I'm going to go ahead and grab a different color for the top. All right, let's just lay on another color on top. I'm going to do white. All right, make it fairly thick. Get your paint knife or anything that has a nice tip, like that folded piece of paper or a paper clip or a butter knife, or maybe you have long nails. You could do that too. All right, and with scraping, we're just simply going to scrape away some of that top layer. Now you do scraping when the top layer is wet. Now scratching, on the other hand, needs to be done when your top layer is dry, and so does abrading. So we're just going to set up 14 and 15 for next class. So let's go ahead and on 14 and 15, paint another color and another layer on top. And we are going to let those dry for next class. Okay, next class you will need either your paint knife or something else that's even sharper, like the tip of the scissors or an unrolled paper clip. And if you can, get a teeny piece of sandpaper. Or if you have no sandpaper, maybe something rough, like a rock or something. All right, that's it for our acrylic chart today. We'll pick up with that next class.